The subject I'm about to discuss relates directly to my last video, talking about how there's a jailbreak underway, and those who falsely believe that we are free will see it as us becoming enslaved. And those who realize that we are enslaved will be able to see it as a liberating force that's come to free us. Kind of like we said we were doing in Syria, just like Libya, Egypt, Iraq, Afghanistan, North Korea, and Iran. We haven't dropped those two yet. We didn't drop Syria, but not because we didn't try. Remember when we said, oh, that dictator, that animal Assad is using chemical chlorine gas on his own people. We need to go free and liberate the poor people of Syria from that dictator Assad. Just like we did Afghanistan, Iraq, Egypt, Libya, and we tried in Syria, but Russia backed him up. So whether these liberating forces that break in our borders look like Chinese or Russians or little green men, you're enslaved. You know this, and everyone else knows this, and everyone will admit this on the day that it's time to pay for what your public servants did on your behalf, because you're in the land of the free, trying to spread your freedom around the world at the barrel of a gun, right? Trying to go give your freedom to all these countries that I just named and free them from the tyrannical dictatorship of the evil ruler that they're under. You got the freedom, right? And you're trying to spread it around the world. So when it comes time to pay the Pied Piper for what your government has done in your name with your taxpayer dollars, those are your servants. You're responsible for what your servants do. They are your employees. They did what you told them to do. On that day, everyone will say, oh no, that's the American government. Those powers and authorities, I don't tell them what to do. They tell me what to do. And I'm powerless to resist anything that they decide to do. They do whatever the fuck they want, and they tell me what I am to do. I am their servant. I am their slave. They are not my slave. I'm not the master. I'm the slave. They're the master. They're not my servants. Until then, we pretend as if those are our public servants. And those countries that I just named, Libya, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, North Korea, and Iran, are all laid out in a document called the Project for the New American Century. So you won't be able to claim ignorance either. Well, how was I supposed to know? The same way that me and any other truther that knows about the PNAC, PNAC, Project for a New American Century, if you wanted to know, you could have. If you chose to turn a blind eye and engaged in willful ignorance, you will be held responsible for that. You cannot claim ignorance. If it was willful ignorance. It's not like you didn't have a way to know. They told you what they were going to do. And they said, we want to topple all of these countries, but it would take a very prolonged time, absent some catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. 9/11 came, they said, hey, there's our new Pearl Harbor. Like we wrote about in this document, in this Project for the New American Century, this plan, this blueprint for the future, where we need an event like this, a catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. Yeah, we just wrote this last year. Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld, David Pearl, not David Pearl, different dude. Richard Pearl, I don't remember. Anyway, the same neocons that were in power during the Bush administration. Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, and other neocons wrote that document that was a blueprint, a plan for the projected future of the United States, the project for the new American century, to prevent anyone from challenging our power and authority the way the Soviet Union did in the 80s. We want to topple all these countries to secure our power and authority. That way no one can ever challenge us ever again. And in order to topple all these countries, it would take a very long time, absent some catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. And we've let this rabid dog of a government run roughshod terrorizing the world in the name of freedom. We're spreading freedom to Libya, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and we're about to go spread some freedom to North Korea and Iran, unless we get stopped dead in our tracks. So when these liberating forces come kicking in your door, whether they look like Chinese or Russians or little green men, you're a slave. And those who know that we are enslaved will be able to see this as a liberation from the slavery that we are currently under. Those who falsely believe we are free would only be able to see this as a process of enslavement when we get invaded, when our powers are seized, including everything from military power to information dissemination platforms. All telecommunications get seized. See, here in the United States, one of our bedrocks of freedom is freedom of the press and freedom of speech. Except we know there's certain things you can't talk about. Like what's been happening for the last couple of years that people are dropping from right and left. On that note, I'll put a link in the description that shows apparently a hydra bulgaris wiggling in the eye of a kid that took the sauce and appears to be dead because they're opening his eye and shining a flashlight in it, and you can see what appears to be a hydra bulgaris. This was conspiracy theory a year or two ago. Now, with that documentary suddenly croaked, and I'm not saying died, and I'm not saying suddenly, I'm saying croaked. The documentary that you can't talk about or you get deplatformed, censored in your land of the free where you're so reliant upon your freedom of the press and free speech. Yeah. When they seize platforms of telecommunications, if you already know that we are enslaved and that there's things you can't talk about, then you'll see it as a liberating force that has come to seize these telecommunications platforms and allow us to talk about the things that we're not allowed to talk about right now. All the other lemmings, the cannon fodder, the average dumbass, will see this as a hostile takeover of the United States, rather than a freeing force that has come to liberate us from the tyranny of the dictatorship and the enslavement that we are currently under. And because the average person has nothing that they can point to where they acted in resistance to this system that we live under, they showed no resistance, they showed no opposition to their servants, their public servants, carrying out this project for a new American century over the last 20 some odd years. Average dumbass has nothing they can show, nothing they can point to, because they'll all say, oh no, I was totally in opposition. I didn't agree with any of that stuff that they were doing in my name. And I didn't authorize it. Until that day comes where it's time to pay the Pied Piper, we're continuing through actions that speak louder than words to support the system and the status quo, paying our tax dollars and saying nothing in opposition to and putting forth no resistance to the ongoing war on terror that never stopped. The world will not shed a tear when the United States falls. Until then, they'll say, oh no, we love America, we love Americans. On that day, every single person will acknowledge, I'm their servant. The government is not my servant. I am their servant. I'm definitely not the master, so I can't be held accountable for what they've done. Everyone assumes they'll be let off the hook because the obvious truth is that you don't have any power. So therefore, who could hold you responsible for what the United States government has done? It's obvious you have no power or authority or say-so or choice in any of the things that happen. So therefore, you couldn't be held accountable, right? Wrong. For living the lie that you're living right now by pretending you're in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and as if those are your public servants, that makes you the master. And for playing that role, for engaging in that charade and that facade, and not showing any opposition to the system, the status quo, the things that are being carried out in your name with your tax dollars, and pretending as if you're in the land of the free and that those are your servants carrying out your orders that you tell them what to do, and they carry out your wishes and your will, because you're the American citizen, the taxpayer, we the people, right? That's who's in charge here. Everyone knows the obvious truth is that we have no power and authority, and that's why we will not be held accountable. You will be held accountable. Those are your servants. The servant does what the master tells them to. And you're the master, we the people, the Constitution, all of our rights, all of our elections. And we pretend as if we're still in the land of the free until the day comes to be held accountable for what your servants have done in your name. And if you're the one that told them what to do, surely you're the one who must be held responsible. And we the people are the ones who tell them what to do, so we the people must be held responsible. You think militaries are the only people that engage in wars? It's a war crime to bomb the citizens of a country. You can only attack the other military of the other country. We are supposedly the will behind that military and this economic system that has tried to envelop the whole world so that no one can ever challenge our dominance and supremacy ever again, as laid out in the Project for the New American Century. So when I tell you there are liberation forces at the perimeter that are going to kick in the walls and reintroduce you to reality because you've been enveloped in a cult and brainwashed into a false reality where your beliefs are so far from the truth, it's going to take some processing to reintegrate you into reality. You know as well as I do, the truth about which I have just spoken is blatant. It is glaringly obvious that if such an event ever occurred, every single American out there would claim, I have no responsibility for what the government did because I'm powerless. They don't do what I tell them. I have to do what they tell me. And you sat by while your slave master, which you obviously will acknowledge on that day when it's time to pay the Pied Piper, while your slave master tried to enslave the rest of the world and say that we're spreading freedom and liberty and liberating these Iraqi people, these Afghani people, the Syrians, the Egyptians, the Libyans. We're liberating and bringing freedom to all these places. And you sat by with your red, white, and blue. America, America. You're going to deserve what you get. It is not the power and pervasiveness of evil that allows it to persist, but the good men and women who stand by and do nothing and turn a blind eye and say nothing, and no one has anything they can point to show that they put up a resistance or had any opposition to this process and this procedure and this way of life that has been being carried out. Why? Because in the pyramid of capitalism, worldwide global capitalism, where do we draw the line? In the pyramid, where the huddled masses of the poor people are on the bottom of the pyramid, and the rich people are right here up at the top of the pyramid. Where do we draw the line? People above that poverty line have wealth and comfort and convenience in their life. People below that poverty line have pain and suffering and hardship as their way of life. As long as you're above that line, you don't care about the pain and suffering and hardship of all the people in the world all around you. That is to say, all the people in the pyramid structure below you. And as long as that machine that threatens you every day with poverty if you don't pay the bills and jail if you don't pay your taxes, as long as you can keep your own personal comfort and convenience, you have no problem with the unsustainable system that you're part of and contributing to. You have nothing you can point to show where you tried to make any effort to change the system, to make a better world. for a greater amount of happiness for the most amount of people. You were fine with the few up here benefiting greatly at the expense of the many down here. As long as you were above that line, and that line keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and this system that we're in puts more and more wealth into the hands of fewer and fewer people, it benefits few at the expense of the many to a greater degree every day. You said, well, hey, as long as I can stay above that poverty line for the rest of my life, who cares what the future Americans will experience as that line, that poverty line, continues to go up, and fewer people are above the line, and more people are below the line? Who cares what my future generations of Americans will experience? Who cares what the rest of the world experiences right now below this poverty line? As long as me and my own personal comfort and convenience can be maintained for another couple decades while I'm here, that's all I care about. You will own nothing and you will be happy. There is such a world where that does exist. The only reason you can't fathom it is because you've conflated the idea of owning things with being happy. You cannot fathom a world where you could possibly be happy and not own things. And that's where it comes to joy, is doing what's in alignment with your true nature. And anything that provides you opportunities to or expands your capacity to experience joy, you say, I love that thing. That thing that brings me opportunities to experience joy or expands my capacity to experience joy. Joy is the feeling you get when you're doing what's in alignment with your true nature. Is your true nature to serve yourself or something greater than yourself? There is such a world where people serve something greater than themselves. And the way to find those people who are compatible with such a world is to create a world that rewards and promotes people who benefit at the expense of others, and pull people from that world who refuse to participate in such a system and try to get ahead and use others to throw as traction under my tires or as rungs on a ladder for me to climb up. Long as I can get ahead, it doesn't matter who else stays behind. In that world that rewards and promotes this type of self-serving behavior, few individuals will stand out, having decided not to try to get ahead within this system that rewards and promotes self-serving behavior, who have tried not to get ahead at the expense of others, but create a better way and a better world for a greater amount of happiness for the most amount of people to serve something greater than themselves. You cannot get to that world from here in this world. The law of physics that says when an object is in motion, it will keep going in the same direction at the same speed unless it's interacted upon by another object. Friction to slow it down, or another object that comes and sets it off course. If it's not interacted on, it will continue moving in the same direction at the same speed forever. Our society has enough momentum that it will not be turned around. There are societies, civilizations, economies, currencies, and stock investments of something greater than yourself. The reason you buy into a stock investment, a Ponzi scheme, or a currency, or a society, a civilization, a way of life, capitalism, is because you see all the other people that have benefited from it. And so you say, okay, I will contribute my time, effort, and energy toward this system, toward this currency, toward this stock investment, toward this societal way of life, because I can see all the other people that have benefited from it. Thus, I have confidence in it. That's the only thing a currency is based upon. Or a stock investment, and particularly a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme. People invest because they see that the other people that have invested and contributed their resources are getting a return on their investment. In such a society where people serve something greater than themselves, the others who are born into that society can see the benefit in the way of life, the life experience that other people who have invested in and contribute their time, effort, and energy and resources toward this way of life, toward this system, true communism, they can see the benefit. They can see the lifestyle and the life experience that others have. And thus they're very willing and ready to contribute their own time, effort, and energy and focus upon how can I find ways to serve other people, to improve the happiness, the life experience of others. Because I can see the world that this type of system has created and the benefit that it has. People in that system are just as eager to find ways to serve as you are to find ways to make a buck. You get up and you spend your 9 to 5 doing whatever you know how to make your daily wages, and you're constantly looking for a way to make more money. There are societies with people who are just as devoted, who are just as eager and ambitious and obsessive about trying to find better ways to serve, to make a greater amount of happiness for the most amount of people, while they're spending their day doing what they already know how to in regards to serving society as a whole, serving something greater than themselves, creating the greatest amount of happiness for the most amount of people in whatever way they know how, and constantly on the prowl, looking for a way to try and do something that would actually make this place even better. You cannot get there from here. We live in a society that will need derailed real hard in order to change the direction, because we have a momentum. And those within this capitalist system, the few that benefit at the expense of the many, want to keep it that way. That's why when any kind of system appears that is something like what you understand as communism, or a business, a corporation that has investment, profit sharing with the employees, the underlying profit margin of the company, of the corporation, gets distributed amongst the employees. Everyone from this other company is going to go work at that company because they can see how much the employees are benefiting for working at that company, where instead of the few at the top of the corporation hoarding all the profits, they redistribute it to all of the other employees. Two companies making the same type of widgets, Ford and Chevy. If Chevy started a profit sharing amongst the employees and redistributed those profits, everyone that works at Ford would go work at Chevy instead. That's why the people at Ford make sure that no operation such as that survives, because everyone would flood to that company. That's why capitalist countries make sure that any socialism or communism that rises turns into hell on earth. Otherwise, people would flood immediately to that way of life in that country, or bring that system here to our country. And those few that benefit at the expense of the many make sure that no such system emerges. They maintain that momentum of our society in the direction that it's going. But from within a society like ours, that's where you can find people who contribute their own time, effort, energy, and resources toward the benefit of others, serving something greater than themselves, applying themselves in an effort to make a greater amount of happiness for a greater amount of people in their own little sphere of influence or in the world at large. And those people who behave in that manner, in a system that rewards and promotes self-serving behavior, they are doing it for ideals and principles that they actually stand for. You see, we live in a society where it pays to be immoral, unethical, and discompassionate. Ask any business owner. They will tell you. If you ask them, where do you factor in morals, ethics, and compassion into your decision making in your in your operation of your business? Each and every one of them without fail will say, I don't. It would cost me money to incorporate or pay any attention to or take into consideration as a factor into my decision making when operating my business. It will cost me if I factor in morals, ethics, or compassion. It pays to be immoral, unethical, and discompassionate. That's the system we live in. That's what it rewards and promotes. That's also why a lot of people don't want to hire friends and family. If they run a business, they want to hire random strangers. Because if I hire friends or family, I'm going to have to treat them like a real decent human being. And then all the other employees are going to see that that person receives favoritism. And the other employees will be disgruntled and unhappy when this employee gets treated in a decent way. So that's why a lot of people have a basic standard policy that you don't hire friends and you don't hire family because you want to be able to treat your employees like random Joe. Everything becomes transactional and they pretend as if they're living two lives. You got your personal life where I'm a good person. And then you got your business life where it's cutthroat, dog eat dog, kill or be killed, where I extract as much value from each transaction as possible. By giving less and taking more. The less you give and the more you take from each transaction, that's your profit margin. The employees try to do this too. They try to find a job that pays them more dollars per hour and try to work less for each hour. They're trying to receive more and give less within each daily transaction of going to work to increase their own personal profit margin. We live in a system that it pays to be immoral, unethical, and discompassionate. Every business owner will tell you this. Many of them even take pride in it. About how stone cold of a businessman I am. Oh, I'm a good person in my personal life. But when it comes to business, oh yeah, I'll squeeze blood from a turnip. I maximize my profit margins by giving less and taking more with each transaction, with every person I interact with. And your whole society, your whole life, your whole world becomes transactional. Friends, marriages, you've heard this terminology, marrying up or marrying down in social economic status. In other words, bank account. Every relationship you have becomes transactional. When you marry up, that means you received more and gave less when going into this bond or this union because they had more money than you when you got married and you had less money than them when you got married, so you married up. All of your relationships become transactional. In this society where it pays to be immoral and unethical and discompassionate. And it costs you if you're going to incorporate morals, ethics, or compassion into your decision making while running your business. That is why this society will never make its way to one that serves something greater than the self. We pride ourselves on rugged individualism. That's what we refer to in American culture. Rather than socialism or communism. Socialism based on the society. Communism based on community. Those are collectives. We here in the United States have rugged individualism, where we try to get ahead at the expense of others. Add to that we've chosen war as a way of life, that we're going to go kill, steal, and destroy. That's what the devil is said to do. Kill, steal, and destroy. That's what the United States does when they invade another country. They kill, they steal, and they destroy. So, it is a moral and ethical obligation for any powers that be who can put this rabid dog down to do it. And the rest of the world will cheer when it happens. Whether that higher power be Russian, Chinese, little green men, or a higher power the likes of which they speak of in Alcoholics Anonymous, referring to a godlike higher power, it is a moral and ethical obligation to put down that society and that community that engages in that way of life and is promoting that culture for the benefit of the greatest amount of happiness for the most amount of people, lest it become a race to the bottom and hell on earth. Everyone will acknowledge the obviousness, the truth of what I'm saying when they are forced to. Until then, there is nothing more difficult to learn and accept and understand than that which would require you to change your ways. That's why you just can't wrap your mind around the truth, because of your personal attachment to the outcome of this equation means you've got hell to pay when justice is enacted. And if there is a higher power like God that is just and moral and ethical, then that settling of that score has to come soon. Otherwise, there is no such thing as a righteous and moral and just God. It would be mercy to the rest of the world to put down that rabid dog that's running around terrorizing the world. And it would be justice being served. So when those forces come to liberate us, I suggest you remember these things and be grateful. Just as colonialism is how America was founded, when we slaughtered the natives that were living here, and we are continuing with a global colonization of all these other countries, where we go in, we invade, we kill everyone, and then we insert our puppet governments in order to insert our way of life, our cultures, our customs, our economy, and turn it into a little America in all these different countries around the world. Colonialism, colonizing, right? It's great when we do it, right? What about when we are about to be colonized by a higher, more advanced civilization? Just like we did when we came in and slaughtered the natives who were more primitive technologically. We are being colonized as a planet right now by a more technologically advanced civilization. But they have social technology, social engineering, not just the laws of physics. They know the laws and principles of how to create a higher amount of consciousness in these petri dishes, these cultures of consciousness that's within a petri dish, that analogy I've been using. Just like the laws of physics is what enables us to develop technologically. When you discover and apply these laws of physics, you can create machinery, everything from these computers to rocket engines to the vehicles we drive. All of that technology is developed by discovering and applying these laws of physics. There are laws of social dynamics that we have failed to discover and apply. But when they are discovered and applied, greater society can evolve. So these higher, more highly advanced civilization that is colonizing this planet right now is both superior technologically and through the technology of cultural engineering. The great harvest that's going on right now is a filtration process of the consciousness within this petri dish to separate people out through stimulus and response. And through that response, it makes it a process of self-selection. Through the stimulus, you evoke a response that shows what's at the core of their being, the core of their character. And through the last couple of years, the stimulus of the vid-19 and the cure was a stimulus to evoke responses of people who prioritize, who are susceptible to authority and peer pressure, and are less in alignment with truth than they are with authority and conformity to peer pressure. Through this stimulus, they have extracted a certain culture of consciousness and made you all show your true colors. These social engineers extract people who are compatible with a type 1 civilization where you don't have to work for your daily bread because technologically it's already all provided for you. If you lived in a world where technology provided everything, and that's the world we are already at, military, agriculture, and industry used to require millions of people for each one of those sectors of society. You no longer need millions of people for industry, manufacturing, production facilities, robotics, and computers. Does it all. Agriculture, ranching and farming, robotics and computers. Does it all. And warfare, directed energy weapons and drones. You don't need millions of people for your army. You don't need millions of people for your agriculture. And you don't need millions of people for your industrial sector anymore. So if you lived in a world where technology provided everything and you didn't have to go to work for your daily bread, what would be your motivation to get up in the morning and do anything? You would have to be motivated from the core of your being to serve something greater than yourself, to make the world a better place, for the greatest amount of happiness for the most amount of people. You would have to be motivated from an ideological base foundation of priorities and principles that you express through your standards of behavior. The way you find those people that are compatible with that type of type 1 civilization is by extracting them from a developing civilization just before it reaches type 1 civilization. That, I would say, is what's happening right now. So then, in such a civilization, what is the currency, the commodity of value, and the stock in trade that people get up in the morning to try and find more of or invest in? The primary stock in trade, the currency and commodity of value, is happiness. How do we produce more of it? That's what your GDP is based on in such a society. How do we create more happiness? You know how you do that? Social engineers. When you've gone beyond technological development in the way that we understand it, and happiness, joy of life experiences, becomes the primary currency of value that people are seeking more of, just like chasing the dollars, the primary investment and commodity that people invest in, then it is through social technology. James True has talked about scapegoat technology. A new type of technology that's about cultural development and enrichment. Consciousness. How do we refine and purify the consciousness on this consciousness farm to create a greater amount of happiness for the most amount of people? Well, we plant a bunch of consciousness farms, and as they reach a certain development, we give them certain stimuli to extract those with the core characteristics that we find compatible with the next level of civilization. Those who are willing to serve something greater than themselves and do so of their own free will in a world that does not reward that. In a world that actually costs you to be moral and ethical and compassionate, you can find people within that world who who are still moral and ethical and compassionate, even though it doesn't pay and it actually costs you, but they still do it anyway for base principles, those people are compatible with a world where it is not extracted out of you by force the way it is today for your daily bread. Who would serve something greater than themselves for their own personally relevant, personally meaningful priorities, principles that they express through their standards of behavior. It's the great harvest. And it's going to be a much better world, worth living in, full of people that are worth living with. And this is how we find those people, putting them through the pressure cooker. This is a refinement and a distillation process. The collective initiation. So again, I say, when our colonizers, those who are colonizing this planet, reveal to you that you're not in charge anymore, kind of like they did when they roasted 5 Secret Service vehicles the other day, lift your eyes to heaven, your redemption draws nigh. And they are advanced and superior to us, technologically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and culturally.